Chargers. Touchdown, UCLA.
With USC great and NFL stud, Frostee Rucker.
The Trojans back in front.
And LAFB founder Ryan Dyrud on the Believe Podcast Network and LAFBnetwork.com. This is your destination for Los Angeles football.
What's up, LA? This is Ryan Dyrud with the LA Football Podcast, and support for LAFB is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision engineering tools for your family jewels. Guys, I know a lot of you skip past these ads or just ignore them, but this is one that will actually benefit you every single time you use this product. The worst thing you can do is get nicks, cuts, scrapes, gashes, anything to your southern region down below. It's painful. It's gross. You don't want it. So that's why Manscaped has redesigned the electric trimmer. The Manscaped engineering team spent 18 months, that's a year and a half, perfecting the greatest ball hair trimmer ever created and just released the new and improved Lawnmower 3.0. And even better, you get 20% off and free shipping with the code LAFB at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use the code LAFB. I promise you, your balls will thank you. What's up, Los Angeles? Happy Monday, beginning of the week. It's a great day to be great, and you're starting the week off right by tuning into the LA Football Podcast here on the Believe Podcast Network, always on LAFBnetwork.com, your destination for Los Angeles football. I'm Ryan Dyrud, joined as always by Mr. 9-0 himself, Frostee Rucker. What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm good, Ryan. That's funny you said 9-0. That was my old watering hole at USC. So, hey, I'm good.
That's right.
Top of the morning, buddy.
I've never asked you, since we were talking about your number, college number 90. You had 90, you had 92 in the pros and 98. Was there is it just because when you went to different teams, your number was taken, or what was the significance there on switching?
Yeah, absolutely. So 90, I got when I got to USC. Obviously, I was a linebacker to start off with, and they just threw 90 at me. I guess they knew what I was going to end up being. I had no idea, right? Yeah. So I took 90. I was lucky to have a jersey from USC, to rock. And then when I got to the Bengals, they just, again, threw 92 at me. And I was so fortunate and happy and grateful. Took that with strides. Mm-hmm. And I got 92 in Cleveland. Just, they fired a guy and I ended up walking into the same number. So it worked out that way, right? Mm-hmm. Lucked out that way. And then when I got to Arizona, their first round pick, which was Dan Williams, a good buddy of mine, he had 92. And there was nothing I could do. I wasn't a quarterback. I wasn't going to throw him $100,000 over a number. Yeah. So I gracefully took 98. And I rocked that for, I believe it was 2 seasons, and then switched to 92 when Dan left in free agency to the Raiders. Gotcha. And then I got it back. And then when I got to the Raiders, I got 98, because
was it because Dan was still there? Or?
No, they gave it to a rookie in the draft. They drafted a rookie, and he got it. So wow. That's how these numbers happen.
Yeah. I think it's funny because you hear stories. Some people, it's a lot bigger deal, like the whole our guy, Michael Pittman, over in Indianapolis. Carson Wentz gets traded there, and Pittman saying, no, I'm not giving him number 11. That's my number.
Exactly. But, there's something to say when a guy has a lot of money, he can throw it at you for a number.
Yeah. Like in Ballers with Ricky Jarrett and stuff, that whole thing.
Exactly.
I remember when I played high school, my dad's number when he played football was 88. So I was like, okay, when I play high school ball, I want to be my dad's number. Right. So when I get there as a freshman, we had a senior tight end who was 88. Obviously, I'm not getting it from him. He was like a star, really good, cool guy. He probably, if I really would have asked, but I didn't care that much. And then one sophomore year, so he graduated. They did it obviously by seniority, but then when it got to sophomores, it was alphabetical order. And the guy in front of me chose 88. And I was like, hey, is there any way? He's like, no. So he wouldn't give it to me. So then I was 89.
What a dick.
Wait, fell. I know. But yeah, anyway, I was always just curious because I know because you went like different years too. It wasn't like you started off and then switched. It was like back and forth. So I've always wondered. That makes sense.
No, so that's how it went for me. I was 44 in high school. And that was a family number that my uncle wore. And I seen that same thing, like what you said with your father. I never seen my dad's high school jersey. It was always a picture of my uncle in my grandma's living room that was really significant for me. He was a running back. He was really good in Tennessee. and he wore that 44. So I was like, I'm grabbing it.
That's great. Yeah.
Wore it and, made history with it.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, you did. It was funny when my dad played, was in the 80s. And so the style then was like the crop top jersey.
Right.
So his game jersey, if you look at photos, literally it was like a total crop top. But then when I played like peewee football, I used it as my practice jersey because it was actually, even though I'm tiny, it was like a normal size because it was such a small, short jersey. But for me, it went down to like my waist.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It worked out.
Hillcrest High, Fergus Falls, Minnesota.
Okay, Hillcrest.
Go Vikings. Oh wait, no, they weren't the Vikings. They were some random mascot. But anyway, got a great show for you today. We are going to look at the NFC West, take a deep dive into the whole division, looking at free agency as we are a mere, I think exactly a week when the tampering period starts next Monday, March 15th, when we will have a lot of questions answered about what our Rams are going to do. We'll look at the AFC West at a later episode for a deep dive for the Chargers. But yeah, for us, we'll look into this. This will be, I think, fun to kind of take a look at each other team in our division, what they'll do. We'll look back at the Stafford trade, how that affects, how, the dominoes will fall and whatnot. So we'll jump into it. But obviously, before we do, BetOnline.Ag is a sponsor for the LA Football Podcast. Frost, you placed any bets recently, or you've taken some breaks since Super Bowl?
I've taken some breaks, man. I'm really if I'm going to do it, it's going to be Super Bowl, something big. I didn't do it for All-Star Weekend with NBA. Heck, I didn't even watch the game. When LeBron went out and said he didn't really want to play it, I was like, maybe the energy won't be the same. And from the looks of ESPN, Steph Curry was cooking.
Yeah, I haven't even looked. So your guess is as good as mine. I saw some tweets and stuff about people talking about it, but I'm like so ingrained in football that I just, especially betting on other sports, for me, it's like so volatile because there's so many games. You don't know who's going to be out that night. If LeBron's taking the night off, if, in hockey, who's injured because they never disclose the injuries. And in baseball, it's like they play so many damn games. So for me, I always like parlay bets. I can bet a little, win a lot. And it's like I end up betting like 5 NBA teams. And of course, one team that I'm like, oh, they're favored. And they get like smoked because they benched like 2 of their players. So it's tough. But for you guys out there, BetOnline.Ag. 50% sign up bonus if you go today. If you haven't signed up yet, you need to do it. BetOnline.Ag. Head there today. Win some cash for the offseason. We can bet on some prop bets, do some NFL draft stuff as well. So great place to go. That being said, Frost, should we start with the Rams and then go down, or should we start alphabetical order and with the Rams? How do you want to do this?
Let's start with the Cardinals. When, they went out and got the big J.J. Watt. I know everyone's talking about that. Does this make the Cardinals a contender is where I'm at. And there's a gray area with me in it, to be completely honest. I want to, take a real deep dive and look at the whole roster and what they need to do. Obviously, J.J. Watt commands a lot of attention right off the bat, but, they also have to make decisions on Patrick Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
They need to, put together a better offensive line. Are they going to bring Kenyon Drake back at running back? There's some holes there. Is
Larry Fitzgerald
going to come back, or is he going to retire? He always makes us hold our breath, but not too long till we pass out. So I really want to take a look at that. So what are you thinking about these Cardinals? What do you think the moves are going to be to make them a contender? And obviously the Cardinals were third in the NFC West with an 8-8 record, which isn't good. It's 500, so they'll take that. But they started off on fire. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about the Arizona Cardinals?
Yeah, they're an interesting team because first let's just mention the free agents. You said they have a lot of free agents. I mean, they have I think they have about $17 million in cap space. I believe that's updated even after the J.J. Watt signing. So they still have some good money to spend. But yeah, they have a lot of decisions to make. You mentioned Marcus Golden. I wouldn't see them bringing him back just because of signing J.J. Watt, and that Marcus Golden's going to command, I would think, double digit in the millions on the market. So, I mean, that's obviously a phenomenal rotational player to have with him, Chandler Jones, and Watt, but I just don't know if they would want to allocate money that way. But so, yeah, they have a lot of question marks to answer within their own room, and then who to go out and get. And, you alluded to it, obviously, offensive line. We talked about it, I can't remember if it was last episode or 2 episodes ago, how offensive line obviously is important, but at the same time, because of the style of play of Kyler Murray, it's not as maybe important as it would be for someone like Jared Goff or Ben Roethlisberger or, Tom Brady, just because he's a guy that eludes pressure so they can focus on other areas. But they still, I think, need to shirt up, because we saw when he injured that ankle, midway through the season, that's when the really decline began for the Cardinals, because he just wasn't as explosive as he was in the past. And, whether you want to put that on him or put that on Kingsbury and his play calling, there's a lot of things. So, but to answer your immediate question, I think this team is a contender. If I'm being honest, I mean, we talked during the season and you were saying, man, this was my sleeper team anyway. I believe you called them, or my team to potentially win the NFC West, or at least make a push for the playoffs. And they looked like it halfway through the season when they were, dominating teams, and they ended up winning that Bills game on that Hail Murray, and everyone was like, okay, this team is legit. And then just went on that skid. So I don't know if it's necessarily they're a player or two away, if it was just coaching mistakes, if it was, obviously a combination of probably all that. Obviously the NFL is, a lot of things go into it.
Yeah.
If it were me, I mean, I think you really need to solidify the running game. You've mentioned a lot, and I agree with you that, good quarterbacks, as great as they are, they still need a solid running game. And they were really inconsistent, I think, last year. You mentioned Kenyon Drake's going to be a free agent. They obviously traded David Johnson a year ago, so they don't have that like true identified back that can take over their backfield and really take the pressure off Murray if needed. So that, I think, is a position of need. You have someone like an Aaron Jones who is going to command a lot of money. I don't know if they want to do that. But if you just, keep Kenyon Drake around and say, okay, you're our guy going forward if he stays healthy, that to me would be the move they make to start with, and then kind of build from there, go to the offensive line, and then drop back into the secondary as well. So that's kind of where I would start. But I don't know. I mean, you mentioned Patrick Peterson. That's a huge question mark too. I don't know if they bring him back or just kind of try to get younger at that spot as well.
When I look at it, I do think they need to bring back Kenyon Drake. He was an exceptional player for him, and that's why they traded for him to begin with, to be in the position he's in. I think you may have to draft a guy. They hit a home run on David Johnson, like you alluded to earlier. He's now in Houston. They did hit a home run when I was there with him. I remember at one point the kid, he returned a kick. He scored a receiving touchdown, a rushing touchdown all in one game. Dude was phenomenal. Find another gem like that. I think, like we said, that offense did not fit David Johnson, and that's why he's in Houston. Even though some backs have had great success in a shotgun set of an offense, one to mention was a Marshawn Lynch. He didn't need to be in I-backs to do the damage he needed to do. He just needed the ball. And so after that running back position, we do need to focus back on Kyler Murray and his development. Obviously, he has all the tools to, light it up on the ground and in through the air, strong arm. He's a playmaker. He's one of these guys that we do not think about size and structure anymore as well as what he can do and what he's capable of doing as a football player. And he's got it. How they develop Kyler is going to be unique, because sometimes watching the games, it seems like the offense doesn't have a rhyme or reason to what they're doing. They're just playing football. They're not calling any plays based on situational things or seeing that the defense has been out there for a long time. So maybe we should run the ball a little bit, let them catch a break. It just seems like they just run plays. And so the development between Kyler and the head coach, which serves as the offense of guru here, I think that needs to be sharpened up. And then I want to cross the ball over and go to the defensive side of the ball. You got Hassan Reddick, you have Marcus Golden, two key guys that you have to pick who's going to be around. Last year, they let Marcus go. He ended up with the Giants, and they ended up having to trade back for him later in the season. He then went on a tear and caused a lot of havoc because of his comfort level. I don't know if his comfort level is going to demand 15, 20 million a year, but they do need to take care of him. I think you don't let him go. We talked about J.J. Watt to start this thing off, but do they keep J.J. Watt as an inside defender, or is he rushing from the outside? Scheme-wise, I believe he will be inside, and that means they would need another edge rusher to complement Chandler Jones. Seeing J.J. Watt on either side, playing the 3 technique or 4-eye next to a Chandler Jones, Hassan Reddick, or Marcus Golden, it's a scary thought, because it's the one-on-ones that you have to win in this game. And if a guy can win a one-on-one across the board, just imagine if they throw in defensive line games. And then behind that, we got a slew of linebackers that are very talented, got a lot of reps last year. Who they bring back, I'm not sure. But then the bullseye goes right back to Patrick Peterson. Does he move to safety? Does he still command the amount of money as a top 5 corner in the league? Jury's out on that. I don't know. I know the competitive nature Patrick plays with. I know how hard he trains. And I think having different defensive coordinators the last couple of years plays an effect on that. A slight suspension that took him out of the running to be a Pro Bowler again, that could have some effect. So a strong offseason by Patrick Peterson training. I'm waiting to see if they throw the bag at him again, lock him down, make him a lifetime Arizona Cardinal, or do they go in other directions and get a couple different guys that can complement the way he plays the game. So the Arizona Cardinals, I'm still out to lunch on you guys. I don't know. But this offseason is huge, and the draft's coming up too.
Yeah. With Patrick sticking with, I'll work backwards to forwards, and then we'll move on to the next team. But I think with Peterson, I think he'll test free agency, obviously, and I would assume he'll get offered more from another team. So it'll come down to if he believes this Arizona team is a true contender, and if he wants to finish his career here or there, and play with the guys that he's been with. I know there was speculation 2 years ago that he wanted out, and then he, came out and said, no, I never did request a trade. So that was kind of a weird scenario, or in this new coaching staff, how he feels or whatnot. But obviously he would be, I think, great to stay. I think he still is a very good corner, just, had maybe a down year, but can be very good if utilized correctly. And part of that could have been, his coordinators or whatever, hanging him out to dry or whatnot, or calling wrong schemes and packages for him. But if they do let him walk, one guy I just want to mention is Mike Davis, who we covered with the Chargers. Had a very solid year. They could probably get for cheaper. He's younger. And so he's a guy that would be able to go in there and fill a void if needed. And they would get probably for cheaper than what they would be able to retain Peterson for. So, and then, speaking of just the edge rushers, as well as anyone, I think you could never have too many good edge rushers. I know, us couch GMs can say, oh, well, they need to allocate that money elsewhere, as I said kind of earlier. But, when it comes down to the stretch after 17 games this season before the playoffs, and when you get to that playoff run, having 3 to 4 to 5 elite pass rushers is definitely not a bad thing to have. I think most Super Bowl winning teams have more than 2 guys. You don't want your third rotation guy, because they're not playing 100% of the snaps, having a huge drop off. And we've seen teams that have 4 guys that can start at this level, but they just are in a heavy rotation, keeps them fresh. And so, I mean, if they can afford it, I don't think that would definitely not be a bad move to be able to keep Reddick and Marcus Golden. Will they be able to? We'll see. And then just moving back to the offense. Yeah, guys on the offensive line, I see kind of linked to them is like Corey Linsley, center from Green Bay. I don't know if they'll spend that much on a center, just as we kind of mentioned, for what Kyler Murray does. Again, not saying you don't want to reinforce the offensive line, but is it necessary to spend 13 to 16 million on a offensive line player when your quarterback is out of the pocket most of the time anyway? So that'll be interesting. And the last thing I want to ask you, Frost, before we move on, that we haven't mentioned, Arizona hasn't had a really solid tight end for quite some time. I don't know how Cliff Kingsbury necessarily wants to utilize a tight end. He didn't really utilize one at all last year. They have 3 current tight ends on the roster that are going to hit free agency, so who knows if they will retain them. There is a player that is looking to be traded that would command a good amount of money, but in the right scheme, right system, used correctly, I think is a top 3 to 4 tight end, and that's Zach Ertz from Philadelphia. Yeah. Do you see them maybe making a run at a trade to bring Zach Ertz, or maybe just re-sign one of their guys and address the rest of it in the draft?
That's very interesting, and I think I like it a lot. I think Zach Ertz's name does sound good in the Cardinal uniform, a fresh start for him getting out of Philadelphia, him running into issues with management there over how much they really like him. Mm-hmm. So I think that would be a good fit. But again, how much do the Cardinals use the tight ends? And I know Zach is going for his own personal goals and, Pro Bowls and wants to win Super Bowls. Does that make a fit for him? We could sit here and say, he's good on the roster, but are they going to throw him the ball? Are they just going to stretch the field with D-Hop, Fitz, Isabella, Christian Kirk? They got some guys there. Where does the tight end fit in there? So I'm not sure it's a good fit, but I love Ertz and the way he plays football.
Yeah, I haven't dove a ton into. I know obviously a little bit of what Kingsbury runs, a variation of like an air raid, if you will, but we mentioned like how do you continue developing Kyler Murray, and I think the easy thing is a running game and then be a tight end outlet, because he just hasn't had one in the NFL, especially today's NFL. We see how important a good tight end is, and there's so few of them, at least skill wise, not blocking wise, but so. I don't know. They might have to give up too much and not want to, but I think it'd be an interesting destination that I haven't heard a ton of people talk about, but not like the guy can't run routes and get you 700 to 1,200 yards receiving if you wanted him to.
Right. And the way you can use him and spread him out in the slot and whatnot, he doesn't have to be in the core as a tight end, and that adds a lot of value. So again, this all comes down to what Cliff is doing. This team's going to go as far as he's going to allow them to go. He needs 100%. To be also under evaluation to see how much growth he's going to have in this offseason, because you threw the keys at him, and the way they puttered as of late of that season, why does he get another chance when other coaches haven't? Right. So it's a make or break season for Cliff Kingsbury, to be completely honest to me. I would like to see some more direction with the offense, and that's where I'm gonna leave it with the Cardinals.
Yeah, they went all in on him and his scheme. So I think that's why he did get one more year. We'll see how this year 3 goes. Well, Frost, if you're cool, then let's go. I say we go alphabetical, and we'll end with the Rams. So we'll wrap the show up with our Rams. So let's go to the Niners next. Niners, obviously rival. All these teams are rival the Rams, but they have a lot of question marks too. They lose a ton in their defensive backfield. They got guys coming back, from injury. They have defensive linemen. Solomon Thomas is a free agent who was a former 3rd overall pick. They still have question marks at quarterback if they want to roll with Jimmy Garoppolo, who I believe was it the GM Lynch or I think it was Lynch came out emphatically and said he's our starter, but who knows if that's smokescreen just to try to raise his stock or whatnot. So I guess I'll just start with this so we don't have to break too much down since we don't follow the team that much, but I guess what do you think are the most important things for them to address this free agency period?
Well, I believe, honestly, we're going to start with Jimmy G, just like you just said. He's the one that was the big bullseye. We've heard all the rumors, the Patriots saying they're going to come in and maybe grab him, see what they'll get for him. He is one of the Patriots guys. Under him, his backups are Nick Mullins and Josh Rosen, a guy that was a Cardinal first-round pick, and he was also a UCLA Bruin. Is it his time to shine? Is the offense too complicated that those two guys can't get the nod? Or I think they sit at the number 7 pick. Do they draft one of these good quarterbacks that can push this offense and lead on that, getting more draft picks in the trade for Jimmy G, getting some cash back, whatever it might be? Does that make this team better? I believe if they deal Jimmy G, it'll be a blow to them because he is a solid quarterback. I'm not saying he's elite, but he's a solid quarterback. There's not many elite ones.
Yeah.
Right. But I think there's guys that giving the confidence behind them and support, they can play just as effective as him and far less cheaper, which could build a better roster.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And that's if they can free money up and bring back some of their guys or go after, like a Quentin Dunbar or something for, that secondary where they're losing.
Right.
They got quite a few free agents on that back end, like I alluded to, and what they do at running back, where I know in Kyle Shanahan's scheme, pretty much anyone can play running back there and, rush for 1,000 yards if they start, but you still got to have the horses there and the guys that do it. They have question marks. I think Trent Williams is a free agent, their big tackle that they traded for recently. Mm-hmm. And so what do they do with him? Do they throw the bag at him or they let him walk and, address that in the draft? There is some good tackle prospects in the first round they could go after. So yeah, a lot of big things for them, after having such a drop off from, going to the Super Bowl to what they had last year. I know they had a lot of injuries, but,
a lot
of injuries. Let me ask you this before I break down more of the roster, because I'm always just curious to this. And I'm not saying this as a point of contention or what I think. I just want to pose the question. Kyle Shanahan has one winning season in his 4 years now with the Niners. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that one winning season, they went to the Super Bowl. But why do you think, in your opinion, he continues to be considered an elite head coach in the NFL with only one winning season? Is it just because they went to the Super Bowl, or is it because they've had the excuse of injuries? Or I've always been curious because a lot of coaches, even McVay, has gotten more criticism, I feel like, and he's had 0 losing seasons. Why do you think Kyle Shanahan's considered one of the elites with?
Well, I personally know a lot of 49er fans. I grew up in Orange County and Tustin here, and all my buddies, shout out to Parker Ontes, the fellas, they are 49ers diehards. Mm-hmm. And they give him a lot of grief. They say the same thing, but they do always side with the whole, there's injuries. They did take it to the Super Bowl. A lot of these coaches haven't even got their club to win a playoff game, and he made it to the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go with he has enough excuses to warn him.
Because let me cut you off real quick. For example, Anthony Lynn in his 4 years had more wins than Kyle Shanahan has. Anthony Lynn was considered like the worst coach last year, even with all the injuries.
Right.
Kyle Shanahan's like a savior still that kind of just skates by. I've just always been curious.
Yeah, I think it's personal, though. I don't think Kyle's went out there and said anything about situational football and said he didn't know what was going on and things like that. And I think Coach Lynn opened the can up for things like that, and I think Shanahan's more polished when it comes to those things. And, you have notable injuries like to Bosa and Lynn had to deal with that too, right? Mm-hmm. You bring up solid questions and caution on why Shanahan isn't getting as much grief as other coaches have and either be on the hot seat, as they call it, right? But I think it's a valid approach that they have had a lot of injuries. Jimmy G hasn't lived up to him. That's not really Kyle's thing, even though I'm sure he wanted him there. I think a hot seat comes after this season, what they put together this offseason. I think the number one priority should be re-signing Trent. He's a hell of a tackle, one of the best to ever come through our game. I played versus him many times, and I tell you what, he was a brick wall out there. And when you have to go against him as a defender, and then you got Mike Mcglinchey on the opposite side. He was a younger guy. They drafted him in the first round in 2018, played sparingly. He's still coming into his own. I'm not completely out on him. I think this team just had a lot of injuries and they couldn't recover from it. I think they still have a solid club across the board. When you look on, the offensive weapons they have, at receiver position, like you said, any running back can get plugged in there. They got the pieces. They just literally, their caution there is the Jimmy G deal and the injuries. And if they can get past and solidify, if Jimmy G's not going anywhere and we can trust the GM's word for it, and we should be able to trust John Lynch. He hasn't swayed us in any other way. If Jimmy G is going to be their guy, they can move on from there and plug around and make some depth to a lot of decisions that they make. Because here you go, you get some awesome starters, but one injury, if your depth isn't there and these guys can't even play, marginally as good as these guys, that's why they keep losing these games. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. The depth part has to be the main focus on this ball club.
Yeah. If I'm a Rams fan, which obviously a lot of Rams fans out there listening, I hope the Niners are bringing Jimmy G back. I think that bodes well for them with now having Matthew Stafford and just his style of play with what the Rams can do on defense and whatnot. So, but yeah, the Niners are still a very good team. I think partially too why Kyle Shanahan does get somewhat of a pass. They are still always very competitive, even with those injuries, and compete. And, all the players, he's great in the locker room and stuff like that. Well, the big question mark is we'll see how that defense is now with Robert Saleh not there as his D coordinator, who he brought over with him when he was first hired. So they kind of built this team together with GM John Lynch, who I know they have a very cohesive war room, if you will, in building the roster together. So we'll see how the defense goes from here and whatnot, and what they use with these, another top draft pick for them. So it's easier to make a run at the Super Bowl when you have, 4 first-round picks in the top 5 4 years in a row. So I'll just say that little jab there at the Niners. But we'll see what they do in free agency. It'll be interesting. So, all right, let's move up north, farther up north, up to 5. Does a 5 keep going that far? I can't remember, but either way.
It goes all the way up there.
All the way up, right? So I know the 1 does. Farther up to Seattle, Lofa Tupu's team up there, Brett Davern's team, our guys. Their biggest question mark, again, with the quarterback. It seems like half the league question mark this year is with the quarterback, and one you wouldn't think in Seattle. Russ has always been the biggest Hawks guy, go Hawks after an interview. He always talks about his love for the team, and out of nowhere comes out and, it wasn't even that bombshell statement, but because of who it was a bombshell. Basically he said, I'm tired of getting hit so much. It's really not that bad of a thing to say, but, I think it got, in my opinion, it got more blown out of proportion than it should have. But just because Russ never says anything at that level, he's the classic team first guy. It was pretty shocking. So let me just start with this. Do you think Russ is the day 1 starter when training camps open with the Seahawks? Or do you think he's with another team?
Yeah, Pete Carroll would be a fool to let Russell Wilson get out of that organization. There's no way. Like you said, he's a team first guy, heck of a competitor. I have an immense amount of respect for him being, I played versus him many, many years, many battles, the way he dedicates himself.
Ooh, I'm going to post that pic of you taking him down. You sent me. I'll post that.
Go ahead. There's plenty of those out there, but No, again, the respect level is so high for me. I don't think Pete Carroll is going to let him go. Yes, they need to figure out ways to keep him Russell clean. They brought back Carl Smith, which is one of his quarterback coaches and one of Coach Carroll's closest aides. He was one of my coaches in when I played for USC, and he really can groom a guy. And that's some of the things that needs to happen. You need that person right there to tell these guys to stay in there, keep fighting, hang in there. And Carl Smith is a good guy, so shout out to Smitty. I think Russell's style of play has led him to this decision of wanting to get more protection and speaking vocal about it. But Russell's style of play is why he gets hit. If he was a, standstill guy like a Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger that sat there and just stayed in the pocket and throw it. But, Russell's dropping back 6 yards. He's sprinting this way. He's dodging this way. And, that's kind of their style of play. It brings me the same thing with Kyle Murray. It's like when you can plug and play ex-defensive linemen to be offensive guards and stuff like that, like they have done with Sweezy. Sweezy started with Seattle. Same thing. That's one of the things that the Cardinals are dealing with. This is the ex-defensive lineman. Not to say he's a bad player, but it's not by trade him being an offensive lineman. He's converted to do that because he'll throw his body around. But is that what you want when you got a $100 million quarterback back there? Is the emphasis is not there. Justin Britt's not there anymore. Mike Upati just retired. He has some holes right there. You got to find some solid vets. But again, that comes with the running game. The more they can run the ball, the better they're going to be at that play action and give Russell some time to throw it back there without getting hit. But if they can't run the ball and everyone can tee off on Russell because they know it's going to be a pass and no one's afraid of the run, here you sit. And then you start getting a disgruntled Russell Wilson that's not going to say go Hawks at the end of his interviews, then something's up. But I believe Pete Carroll will do whatever it takes to make sure Russell's happy. Like you said, he's brought additions to the offense with Carl Smith coming back to help Russell. And I think the Seahawks will be foolish to let Russell go.
Yeah, I mean, we both have obviously a huge respect for Pete, what he did here in LA with the Trojans, and he just, I think, signed an extension, and, he's not like old, but I would assume he's getting towards the end of where he would maybe want to retire. And I don't think it'd be in his best interest to start over with a new quarterback when this is kind of his last window to make a run. And you want to do that with a top 3 quarterback, which Russell Wilson is. You're telling me you want to trade for draft picks and start over with a rookie on your last coaching contract? Makes no sense for Pete to do. And I think Russ is just doing, like I said, in my opinion, I'm not in these rooms. You aren't either, but you've been in these rooms. I think he was, got a little bit out of proportion. He's just saying, hey, our center is going to be a free agent. My guard's retiring. I'm tired of getting hit. Let's just make sure we stir this up in free agency in the draft. I think as simple as that, which they can do with,
right.
They have about like 11 million, I believe, which isn't a ton, but guys like Corey Linsley, who I mentioned before as a center, would be a great pick if they can get him. If they want to go a little cheaper, Austin Ryder from KC, who I don't think KC is going to let go. But if they can throw a little bit more money at him, because I know KC's pretty strapped too with all the big money they've been throwing around, maybe that's a center they can go get. And there's guards out there tackles and guards that they can, upgrade. Kelvin Beachum from Arizona, who you might know, can maybe be an addition as well. So, I think they do that. And then you mentioned the running game, Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde are both free agents. So are they going to bring Carson back, or is Carson, I know he came out and said he's looking for a pretty big payday, which I know he's a phenomenal runner, but he can't really stay on the field. So I don't know if the Seahawks will give him that, but they have a guy like Mike Davis, who was in their organization before, played great in Carolina when Christian McCaffrey was injured last year. Maybe they can bring him back for a little cheaper and make him featured. And then the last thing I'll mention is, their new offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, comes from LA. So as Rams fans know him well, was the passing game coordinator under Sean McVay. So I'm sure we'll see a more recognizable, at least in Rams terms, offense that is going to be heavy play action, roll out for Russ, get him in space, make it so it's not as critical for that offensive line to be great because of the style the offense will be. So in a sense, I think they don't even need to do huge upgrades because the offensive scheme will benefit him in a sense of moving him around more, utilizing the play action more. And then that in its turn will work. So in my opinion, I don't think there's any way in hell Russ is not a Seahawk next year. I think it'd be a slap in the face almost to Pete Carroll if John Snyder dealt him, because he basically said, here, groom this guy before you retire and then enjoy the Bahamas and we'll see where we go from there, kind of thing. I don't see it happening.
No, I don't either. And I think they'll do whatever it takes to make sure they're one of the elite teams. And this is another team, this NFC West, that started off hot. You had your Cardinals, you had your Seahawks, Niners stumbled, but Rams, like all these teams started off really, really, really hot and were cooking, and then they just flamed out. So something was up. Something was up in the West Coast and that water. So they need to get it fixed. And I think Pete Carroll will be the guy to figure this out. And again, that offense hasn't been the same since Tom Cable has left. And I'm just going to say that and put that out there for the universe.
Oh, absolutely. And I think part of it too is just a very predictable offense. And something against Brian Schottenheimer, who's a very capable play caller, but we watched that Rams game. I mean, there was that interception, Darius Williams pick six was like so predictable that it was going to happen. I was on the couch like, oh, it's gonna be a pick six, and boom, there was a pick six. So it just became predictable. So, Shane Waldron, I'm bummed to see him leave the Rams, but I think he'll be hopefully an upgrade at least at that and make this offense tick a little better. Cause they haven't been the same since you mentioned Tom Cable, and the defense was not the same to start the year, but really picked things up in the latter half. So we didn't really even talk about the defense too much. I mean, they have some big free agents, KJ Wright, who's really important to that linebacking core. Yeah. I mean, he's obviously not quite as good as Bobby Wagner, but he's a very key piece to why Bobby Wagner is who Bobby Wagner is, because KJ Wright holds his own beside him. So is that a guy I think you pencil in as they need to throw the money at him to keep him?
You throw the money at him, there's draft, there's trades, and things can be reasonable out there, but you have to keep your core guys there. And the more core guys you leave, if they don't have tread left on their tires, yeah, they can go. But if they still got some tread left on those tires and they can get some miles out of them, you're looking for experience. You're looking for dedicated guys. You're looking for locker room leaders. And that's what you need. And that's the core of Pete Carroll's philosophy. It's keeping those core guys around to make sure everyone understand what's at stake and how important it is each and every day as they go to work. And you can't lose too many of those guys. And over the years, that happens in football. Obviously, when Chancellor retired, and then you get rid of Richard Sherman, and things haven't been the same because of those core guys aren't there. So if you have a chance to hang on to those guys, you do that.
Yeah, and he, I think he's still right around 30, so he's got plenty of tread left. And obviously they traded for Jamal Adams last year, so you have a lot of money spent there on the secondary, at least in one regard of the safety and some other players as well. So as long as the Hawks have Russ and Bobby Wagner, they're going to be competitive. But they got to obviously make sure to appease their most important player, and that's Russell Wilson. And
also our good friend Carlos Dunlap. Carlos Dunlap got there mid-season. He made a huge impact on them, played really well. Mm-hmm. And again, he'll be back. And that, again, is something that should be noted, that you got to get these core guys back. And if you already got a good foundation of guys, don't mess it up. And I don't think Pete Carroll's a guy that's going to completely rip the rug up from under his own team.
Yeah.
He wants success. He wants Super Bowl rings. They want to get back to Super Bowl, and the Super Bowl's in LA. So I think that'd be a great homecoming for Pete Carroll if he can make his way back.
Yeah. They don't have time for rebuild. And one last guy that I don't think they can afford, but Carlos Dunlap's former teammate, Cincinnati, is a free agent. So I mean, if they can pair those two, but I don't think they can afford him personally. Or if they did, that'd be like their one signing, and they wouldn't be able to address the offensive line. But just something to monitor, something to think about.
Correct.
So, but yeah, we'll see. Me and you both agree. I don't think Russ goes anywhere. I think they'll get that figured out, as they should. I know Rams fans would like to see him gone, but I don't think it'll happen. So let's end with our Rams. We've done, some shows on free agency. I did one on realistic free agent options for them with their cap situation, but yeah, let's just end with them, Frost, and we'll kind of backtrack a little bit to this trade that we've talked about before, the Goff Stafford trade. Obviously the Rams send 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick and Jared Goff for Matthew Stafford. Let's just start with this. I know we've talked about it before, but just to kind of reiterate, this trade makes the Rams a Super Bowl contender. Do you agree?
I do agree that. I think the Rams went all in to make Stafford the priority, to get the ball down the field, to score points, which is what Sean McVay is there for. He's there to lead these guys in the air in that offense, to do some damage and make it hard on defenders. Again, I think the trade worked out. There wasn't too many guys other than Aaron Rodgers that I would like to see play for the Rams or be put in that position to work with Sean McVay. They're all in two first rounds, and what else was that?
And a third.
2 first rounds and a third to get Stafford away from Detroit and Goff to Detroit. That's a lot. You put a lot of emphasis on this guy, so you have to protect him. They brought Big Whip back. They need to shore up some more depth on that offensive line, because when you start to have to shuffle guys around because you didn't address those things in free agency or in the draft, your team starts to get a little deficient in those areas, and that's bad if you went all in on one guy. Hopefully, whatever other draft picks they do have, those could be trade baits also. They could trade those and get more. They can get more later tier guys and, that build rosters. I was a 3rd-round pick. They gave up that one, but I played a lot of great ball with a lot of 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th round guys, and those are just draft picks. You can get undrafted guys that can really, do some damage. And, so the real emphasis here is going to be on the scouting department this offseason. They have to they have to churn oil and water and make some butter out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's going to be tough is they lost their head scout and Brad Holmes, who's now the GM of the Detroit Lions. So a lot of moving parts with this Rams team that'll be interesting. But, I heard one GM, I can't remember who it was who said this, but he said just like last week, that you don't build championship teams through free agency, you fortify them. I'm paraphrasing, but essentially you build through the draft and you fortify and build depth through free agency. You don't go out and spend $80 million in free agency and expect that to be, because you got to build continuity. You got to have the right pieces fit. And, I'm sure people could disagree with that. I mean, we've seen teams that have been built through free agency that have won Super Bowls. So, but that was his opinion. And I think that's kind of where the Rams are at, just because they can't be spendy in free agency. I mean, there's still $35 million over the cap right now, so they still have to restructure and maybe cut a few guys to get under it. I do believe they'll get to that maybe 15 million mark. I know some Rams fans have been saying 50 million. I think that's a pipe dream that I do not think will happen. But if they can get to that 15 million mark, then they can at least retain Darius Williams, Troy Hill. If they want to retain Austin Blythe, that we talked about last episode, Frost at center, which is, I think, important for that continuity. And then just adding, pieces like you mentioned, just adding depth guys that can really build upon this roster they've already are all in on, but guys that they're not going to go break the bank on, and then use the draft to add guys that they're going to get on the cheaper because they're later rounds, and then they're going to kind of build for the future. So thinking future picks. So I know I've seen a lot of people that really want Marvin Jones here in LA because of his connection with Matt Stafford. And obviously I would love that. Would be a great fit. He's a high point catch receiver who would be different skill set than what the Rams have at receiver, but I just don't think they're going to go spend 9-10 million for a receiver. So unless Marvin Jones wants to come here for half that, which perhaps, but I don't know if a player, I know they, talk about chasing rings. I don't know if a player's going to take half of what he's worth. He might take a little less, not half. So I see more guys like John Ross, who, they can get on the cheap, who's trying to show he wasn't a bust after being 9th overall. I see a guy like D.D. Westbrook, drafted by Jacksonville, who was a phenomenal college player at Oklahoma, trying to prove he wasn't a bust. These are guys that are speed guys, 4.3 40 guys. They can come in for cheap, be a different skill set than what we have in Bobby Trees and Cooper Kupp, and they won't break the bank, but they can come here and rebuild their careers here in LA, which has kind of been the grounds of since Sean McVay has been here. Is these players come in that, I don't want to call them bust, but necessarily didn't have the start to their careers they wanted to come to LA, and all of a sudden there's these great players in this great system. So those are the players for us. I see the Rams going after more guys like a Will Parks. I mentioned a Solomon Thomas up in San Francisco, who productive wise has not been very good. Productive wise, obviously he's still a great talent. They could get him for cheaper, come down here and prove why he was drafted 3rd overall. So guys like that you can get on the cheap, come in here, prove yourself, play alongside Aaron Donald and Matt Stafford, and go get a ring.
Yeah, and I also think we're going to look at a lot of these high-end players that these Rams that do have, that a lot of people value. Cooper Kupp, Bobby Trees, even Brockers. They might be up for trade, and this can really throw off a lot of people just because people bought jerseys and they become really familiar with these guys, but they have a lot of value. And if they can get some picks back, some money back off these guys, here's the work of the new GM. and Woody comes in and assembles, but he needs something to work with. And those three guys that I mentioned give him a lot to work with. And just don't be surprised if, these household names, like I said, Bobby Trees, Cooper Kupp, Brockers, they're up for trade. You never know.
Yeah, I know. Certainly hope not. And let me ask you this. I'll put you on the spot. Do you see, and I'll give one first, you can think about it, but do you see, and I hate even bringing this up because, but it's just part of it, especially in this league year with the cap down, there's always a cap casualty guy that, is a guy that's signed, but he maybe doesn't have a lot of dead cap and becomes that cap casualty. Two players that I kind of look at, and maybe these are two that you're thinking too, but, Rob Havenstein, the tackle who, still has 2 or 3 years left on his deal. And they do have some young guys behind him, Bobby Evans, David Edwards, who both played tackle that they just drafted. I know they played guard inside, but they can play tackle. And then also a guy like Tyler Higbee at tight end who had a really good season, but then last year wasn't really utilized that much. So maybe they think, hey, they drafted Bryson Hopkins last year. They can get a really cheaper option either in free agency or the draft again. So those are two guys I see. Don't want it to happen, but I could see as a potential cap casualty to get to that positive number because, they can do some restructures, but there's going to have to be some cuts, unfortunately, to get them back in the black. Is there any names you see or maybe just those two?
I think you hit the bullseye with Rob. I don't think he can play any position but right tackle. And if the GM isn't looking at more valuable guys that can switch positions up and down the line, more guys that can add depth and play up as for going down, he's going to be the bullseye there. I think they can upgrade at that position with someone younger and cheaper. And again, this now becomes the game of the Rams is how to recoup money, because if not, they're running out of all ways to make a push. Yes, they got their quarterback, but up front, you got to get guys that are going to block for him. And needless to say, they're going to block for him for a few years, right? So you might as well go with some more youth at that position. I think the stalwart guy here that they're not going to move is going to be Andrew Whitworth, just because they love his presence. But anyone else can be replaceable up in that front. They do need to re-sign their center. And I think Rob's going to be that camp casualty. Yeah,
so we'll see. I mean, obviously those are tough decisions to make and not ones you want to, but I think that's one that makes sense, I guess, in the terms of the cap, and one they'll have to maybe make. And one that now they have a new offensive line coach too. Obviously he'll be assessing this and looking at the whole offensive line of guys that he like and who he wants to keep and what continuity he wants to do and whatnot. So, defensively, Leonard Floyd sent a tweet this morning with, probably means nothing. These players love doing this nowadays, posting on Instagram and Twitter, just getting the fans riled up. But he posted a picture of him and Morgan Fox with the little, like a gunshot emoji or something, basically like, lights out or whatever. So maybe they're talking about bringing him back somehow.
Who knows? I hope so. He was that one player that we didn't, on our show, have big plans for and whatnot. And he exceeded every expectation for me. He played phenomenal. He was one of their leaders, and he was a quiet leader and just went about his business. And again, that's another guy like we're talking about with this Rams team. You get guys that can come in and play higher than what's expected, and that can get them to where they go until everything gets balanced out. And I, again, think Leonard Floyd deserves to be on the Rams. I think he put the work in. He had stats, and him being able to run it back and gives proof from other people. You don't have to be making the big bucks to be on this team. They'll get rewarded down the line. Just play. And, and that's my assumption on the Rams.
So that being said, one last question, one last player I want to throw at you. If they don't bring Leonard Floyd back, if he does get a bigger payday elsewhere, one other free agent that productivity-wise has been down the last 2 years, but I think still has talent and Rams could get for cheaper, Davian Clowney. What do you think of him in LA?
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing. But again, he's a guy that will hold out for more money. If his ego's gone and whatnot, I think it'd be a great fit. I mean, there's no doubt he can play football, right? There's no doubt about it. But there's a lot of maturity that has to come with that to be able to put in a position to know that the Rams are cash strapped, and you may not get everything you want, but if you come in here and you lead us to a Super Bowl, we're going to reward you with that. So if that's the conversation, yeah. But if he's just looking to break the bank on someone, and that's just not going to happen. It can't happen with this franchise right now.
No. And you've talked about before, come to LA and you can make a lot of money elsewhere. not just in the building or in the organization. You can make a lot of money elsewhere here in LA. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because he, last offseason after being with Seattle was demanding $20 million, ended up signing for, I think 14 or 15. And I saw that based on his numbers, his market value right now is about 7 to 8 million, but I'm sure he'll want much more than that. So we'll see what happens, but if he's willing to take less, I mean, he'd be a fit to come in, rekindle that career and play alongside Donald, where his numbers have been down maybe in the past because he's been the focal point of the pass rush. And if he is the secondary pass rush, we could see him easily be a double-digit sack guy, which he's never done in his career, which is kind of surprising to say. Never had double-digit sacks. But he does a lot more than the stat sheet. Obviously, a lot more that goes into playing a football game than getting sacks, and he's very instrumental in that. So we'll see what happens. I'm excited, though. A week away till the tampering repair. I love every year. Monday, March 15th is a crazy day for me. A lot of stuff going on. So, Frost, before we wrap this up, we've talked before, you're a sneakerhead, right?
I am a sneakerhead. I like foams. I like Jordans. Obviously, I just got some patent leather ones. All right, what's going on, man?
Yeah, well, obviously, eBay, we mentioned it before, our sponsor, is the place to find the shoe you're looking for. It's the original sneaker marketplace. And with eBay's authenticity guarantee, your sneakers are meticulously inspected by independent professional authenticators, which, a lot of times when you buy online from a third party, you don't know for sure if the shoe you're buying is the shoe you're getting. Well, with eBay, rest assured they will be authenticity guaranteed, and the tag is included with a digital stamp of authenticity. It also protects sellers with a verified return process. If you're a seller out there, eBay has eliminated selling fees on sneakers of $100 and up, making it free to sell or flip your collection. So if you buy a pair of J's and you want to flip them to earn some extra cash, no fees. Can't beat that. Go to ebay.com/sneakers today. That's ebay.com/sneakers, the world's best destination for discovering great value and unique selection.
And they got it all, man. I got size 14 boats, so they took care of me. They can take care of you.
Ooh, 14. All right. 9 over here. Size 9. Man-child. So, all right, Frost. Well, yeah, there's our NFC West deep dive. I know it's probably a little heavier in the other teams. That's just because we've talked a lot about Rams free agency. So we wanted to give perspective on these other teams so that you Rams fans can kind of see what else is out there for our division as we head into the 2021 offseason. We'll do the Chargers either next episode or just later down the line before free agency kicks off, the AFC West, that is. And then after free agency gets going, we'll obviously talk about signings, maybe get some of these new guys on the show, welcome them to LA, and then it's full on into draft season, which happens on April 29th. So thank you all for sticking around and tuning in during this off season. Frosty, thank you, my man. Appreciate you as always.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, LA, check in with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Find Frost on socials at The Organic Frost. You can find me at Ryan Dyrud, LAFB. Main account is at LAFB Network. Everywhere you look, Facebook, Instagram. We are on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, and we're everywhere you listen to podcasts. So make sure to subscribe there as well. Thank you all for listening. This is the LA Football Podcast. We'll talk to you later in the week.
Peace.